We're part of a new project called People's BRICS. And what the new project is designed to do is generally in support of what the basic things that BRICS is trying to do, gaining sovereignty of the developing countries, increasing their internal trade, trying to stop the exploitation that historically we've been suffering from the Western imperialist countries, from the United States, Europe, Japan. But we're also approaching this from the point of view of not passively watching events going by, but we want to try to intervene and link up with community activists, trade union activists, political activists around the BRICS countries and the developing world, seeking to take advantage of the BRICS development to bring real benefits to working people. And as such, while we're generally supportive of the BRICS, we're also, wherever it's necessary, we're willing to criticize it if we feel it's falling short of its values, but from a constructive point of view, from a positive point of view. So if we see if BRICS is not doing, if BRICS country is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, we'll say so, and we'll support activists in any country who are fighting for, genuinely fighting for the implementation of the BRICS principles and principles in favor of ordinary people. So that's basically the project we're involved in. It's very new. We've got a YouTube channel, and we're recording this program. It's going to go out on the YouTube. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to the channel. In due course, we'll offer an option for you to join our project. And certainly, if you feel like you want to write to us, we put our email at the end of each YouTube video. Okay, so that's the basic background. And today, what we're talking about is the international implications of the American election results that we've just seen with the election of Donald Trump and the Republicans. All right, so let me open the floor to anybody who would like to contribute on this subject. So, Chris, you were saying before we started, you were talking about how you thought the Americans might like to try to split the BRICS countries.
Yes,
Would you like to say something about that?
Well, it's perhaps a little bit early to jump to this, but nevertheless, some of my thoughts on the Trump administration and certainly the appointments he's making. It would appear that there's going to be a global trade war between a Trump-led US and China. And we've spoken before about the growth of the BRICS, the development particularly of China, and how the US might respond. And I think this may be a period where we're going to have a strange contradiction of protectionism and inward-looking administration, but using the possibility of tariffs and international trade as leverage, possibly to try and bring India slightly away from the BRICS development. And I mean, I had a quick look before. The US and India's trade is about 190 billion, by far, India's biggest trade partner. We know that Modi and Trump have a good personal relationship. And I don't know what other people think, but I think this is a likely scenario because we've spoken before that we don't foresee the US just lying down and allowing this development to continue unfettered. And this may be a mechanism to start trying to cause not so much a rift, but confusion within some of the BRICS developments. On the other hand, some of the Trump rhetoric prior to his election was also aimed at tariffs against India. But as I say, I don't know what other people think. I think that may be a way of getting leverage with India rather than a direct trade war.
I mean, the other issue is a possibility that if Trump introduces these tariffs, it could be self-defeating in a way because China could turn around and say, well, what's the point in us trying to trade with America now? We got these tariffs. We can just back off, and we won't get involved with it. We'll just They'll just trade with other countries instead. So America would start to isolate itself more and more. It's not facing the reality of a changed world with the rise of the BRICS. America can no longer carry out 19th century policies such as tariffs in order to compete on the world stage. The world has changed.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting fact about tariffs in relation to America is that up until 1913, America did not have an incomes tax, and they used tariffs as their main form of government revenue, which is a bit weird, isn't it? But then in 1913, they switched over to the more typical arrangement that they had in the rest of the advanced world. Now, that's relevant because Trump thinks he's being very clever. He said that basically he wants to use the tariff system as a big revenue generator for the government, because obviously, all the foreign countries who have tariffs slapped on them will then have to pay those tariffs to the American government when their exports are imported into America at the point of entry. And he's hoping that will, one, it will help with the deficits in America, but it will also help. It will help offset the big planned tax cuts he's promised people. The trouble is as Mickey says, there's two obvious flaws in this argument. One is that you increase the tariffs so much that the price of those goods become too expensive and people stop buying them. So, for example, they put 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, and nobody's buying electric vehicles from China in America. Incidentally, that's a big drawback to the American economy, because what they're doing is that they're looking a gift horse in the mouth. They don't realize that they're passing up a fantastic opportunity where the cost of American transportation could be dramatically reduced if they allowed Chinese electric vehicles to come into America, and these vehicles are going to get cheaper and cheaper. So that would reduce the cost of transportation, which would then reduce the cost, which would benefit American people and workers who are having to pay a lot of money for their to get to work and so on, because in America they don't have don't have much alternative. Public transport services are pretty dire. And then the other side is that it means that they could have reduced, with cheap transportation, they could have reduced the cost of production in America. So by not allowing cheap Chinese vehicles into the country, they're keeping the cost of living high on transportation. And that's being, by the way, that's being reflected at the moment, where there's been a huge fall off in the sale of cars, because the ICE cars, with the traditional combustion engine, they've all gone up in price in America very considerably, as has motor car insurance and so on. And so there's a lot of, they can't sell the cars in America because workers can't afford to buy them. So that's just an example of how the cost of living is being affected and the efficiency of American society. And of course, they won't be able, with the high cost of transportation in industry, that's going to make it even more difficult for them to be competitive. So it's a very short-sighted policy, this idea of keeping out goods. And what you're doing is you're going against the division of labor, the efficiency, the division of labor in society that operates all around the world. And you're not able to take advantage of reducing costs because of new technology. So that's one big problem with this strategy. So you may not be able to get the goods in the country, or if you are still buying the goods in the country, then that means that everything is much more expensive. And that's again another hit on the cost of living, which is, Trump has been elected. One of the major reasons why he won the election, obviously, was because of the high cost of inflation over the last couple of years. So that's another drawback. But also, the countries that you've imposed it on, they may take the point of view, well, and I'm sure they will, that we can't rely on the American market. So let's look for other parts of the world where we can sell our goods, which is the whole strategy of the BRICS, isn't it? That they're trying to create an intertrading system within the BRICS, and so that they don't rely on the Western countries anymore. And so you're just accelerating that process. So there's all these flaws in this tariff policy.
Yes, it's simply absurd, but my biggest fear is not what will Trump do, but what will the Democrats do? Because I just read an article saying that the Pentagon is fearing some absurd orders from Trump. Now, I don't know in what capacity they are discussing this, since I don't know who elected them, but like it or not, Donald Trump won the elections, and moreover, he won the popular vote. So last time Donald Trump won the elections, all the liberal elites went crazy and they started this Russia gate. And I think it contributed a lot to the demonization of Putin, of Russia. And it set the stage for what was to become this war in Ukraine, where nobody was allowed to criticize. They basically called all sorts of and pushed everybody who was willing to step out of line and have a nuanced debate about it. And my biggest fear is, what will they do now? Because they seem pretty desperate. I mean, you are looking to the level of, insults that they are willing to throw, not only on Donald Trump and towards Donald Trump, but towards Americans. And this is very dangerous. Actually, we'll live through this type of abuse in Romania when we had presidential elections, where apparently the campaign strategy was to demonize the voters. Not the politician, but the voters, the people that were voting for that politician. And I think this is extremely detrimental, extremely. Because in Romania, there was this idea that old people steal your future because they are not voting for the liberals and they are voting for the social democrats, for instance. And there were campaign slogans that said, hide your ID card, hide your grandmother's ID card so she can't vote. Can you believe it? I mean, they went so far. And that tore apart, the social tissue, what holds us together. They basically polarize society, and it is polarized beyond repair. So I'm very curious, what will they do now? Because except for the tariffs, which I think Professor Richard Wolff gives a very good analysis of it, it is not the Chinese who are paying for the tariffs. The tariffs are actually a tax, and the importers are paying for the tariffs. I mean, and the tariffs go to the state, to the US Treasury. I mean, there is this idea that tariffs are a weapon against Chinese. No, tariffs are a weapon against importers. And just think about it. For instance, you have a company manufacturing, I don't know what, underpants, I don't know, whatever. And they are allowed in Mexico, because they don't have tariffs, to buy a truck fleet of formed by electric vehicles from China, much cheaper. And you have the same company in the United States, but they are not allowed to buy cheap trucks, cheap electric trucks from China. There is already, it's so absurd economically to have this type of policy. But I'm telling you, this seems like, something mild. I am worried about the Democrats and what they will do, because I think one of the main reasons also why Donald Trump won is the fact that the Democrats feel that they are entitled, they are superior, and in the name of democracy, they have to save everybody, and also Americans, from themselves. And this is a very dangerous position to be in, when you have this messianic, impulses towards society, you step out of democracy and you're destroying the very thing you're pretending to protect. And I am trying also in Romania because they are so taken, with these ideas that now Donald Trump is going to come. I actually have, intellectuals in my Facebook list claiming that the demons are now in the White House. I kid you not. I mean, it reached the level, of almost pathology when discussing what happened in these elections. So 3 ideas. First of all, the danger coming from the Democrats, the danger coming from the demonization of the voters, not only of Donald Trump, the polarization of society, and how would this impact also other countries, especially countries like Romania, where I currently reside, where people are very connected to what happened to United States, since we also have a big NATO base in my country. But this is not the only reason. I keep telling Pat, and people are having a hard time believing, but if Romanian intellectuals are true believers, they truly believe in the United States, and they are still rocking like it's 1980. It's like they never read the newspapers, in between, and they are still caught up in this fantasy about the savior, the United States. And now this demon came and somehow he wrecked everything because everything was perfect. Had it not been for Donald Trump, things would have been perfect. And the last point I want to make is this unwillingness to step and to have something else. I think, as crazy as it may seem, I think voters wanted Donald Trump because he seems something else, and they want something else. But unfortunately, since the left was sterilized by the Democratic Party, was destroyed, was reduced to discussions about toilets, and since we have this situation where the left was destroyed, basically, in the United States, people cannot articulate a real socialist alternative. And now he thinks he's going to fight China with tariffs. I mean, good luck with that. I think it will end up in a disaster. There's no question about it. And yeah, let's see. Let's see. Well,
Thanks, Maria.
I agree with some of what Maria said. It might sound outrageous, but I think that Trump is laying the basis for the revolution that will take place in the United States of America. The Democrats have completely lost the plot. They like the Labour Party assume that ordinary people, black or white or women, working class people, will always vote for them regardless. We see it happening all over the world, where the Labour Party type or social democrats parties around the world have assumed that the oppressed class will vote for them regardless of what they do. Now, they have paid very dearly because of the 2 wars that they have funded, which is crucial to what is happening in the United States of America. You may feel that this right and left terminology, I don't think it has any relevance in today's world, to be honest with you. Who's right and who's left and on the left. We need to rethink those terminologies because we have to take into consideration the usage of words. You see, Trump understands the mentality of the working class. People were not interested in the immorality of Trump, your ordinary person. Even the refugees or what you may call unregistered migrants who who Trump had aimed to deport them when he comes to power. a very significant number of them voted for Trump. For me, who lives in Guyana's neighbor of Brazil, and we are in the American continent. For those who will be listening or looking at this video, we border Brazil and Venezuela on the western side, and Suriname, which is a former Dutch colony, on the eastern side, and on the north, we are bordered by the Caribbean Sea, which includes the Caribbean countries. I think globally, ordinary people were fed up with the way in which Biden had conducted these two wars. I think we need to take that into consideration and probably have some discussion of that, because we need to understand what is happening and what is going to happen in the future. Because in the Middle East itself, if we were to look what is happening in Gaza, people are not going to forgive the Democrats for allowing the Israeli dictatorship for slaughtering thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. We have not got the figures yet, but all those people all those buildings that they destroyed. And I remember Pat saying some time ago somewhere where we were having this discussion, and he said that there were those buildings that they were destroying, they're laying the basis for a long-term guerrilla warfare. So we are not going to get out of this wood, because the Arab people and Muslims, who are about 1 billion people, are not going to forgive the Democrats, Biden and the Democrats, for allowing this war to continue. So that's a very crucial element of the reasons why Trump came to power. Trump is one of the, I would say, one of the strongest, perhaps the best president, the president that won hands down all the elements of American democracy. So he can say he's a champion of democracy more than anybody else. I will leave it to that for the time being.
Thanks, Mike. Altaf, welcome to Altaf from Pakistan.
A couple of quick things, Pat.
Right.
This demonization of people voting for populism, so to speak, that Maria mentioned. Of course, in the UK, with the referendum on leaving the EU, that is precisely the reaction of the establishment, the liberal media, the centrists in Parliament, which probably leads to an entrenchment of those views. So I think Maria's quite right that that's a very, very poor tactic. And just to perhaps give some context to something Mike was saying, perhaps the most accurate opinion poll in the American elections was the consistent one that said Americans were dissatisfied with both candidates, which is perhaps why Trump pulled just about 2.5 million votes less than his 2020 defeat, and the Democrats about 14 million less. Just a couple of thoughts on what was being said earlier.
Yeah. Just to follow up on what Maria said, which I had never thought about before, but it's a very good point. The point she made that the BRICS countries and the developing countries generally are, if Trump imposes these tariffs and on Chinese technology, Chinese imports and so on, which are usually the Chinese imports are reflecting that technology, it's going to actually make the developing countries more competitive, because they're not imposing these tariffs. And so I'm in Brazil, so we're happily accepting the electric vehicles here, And we've also got a situation now where we've got 4 Chinese electric vehicle factories here. So that will mean that our transportation will rapidly get cheaper and more efficient, which will reflect itself in the whole economy and any exports we do. For example, you know, they're starting now to produce, China's now starting to produce electric vehicles for farming, which is a big industry in Brazil, which will reduce the cost of farming even further in Brazil and make it even more competitive against American farming. So you could see, and this could happen. We're now America banned Huawei, which is the leader in telecommunications around the world, you know, but we, you know, countries like ourselves and across the developing world, we're welcoming Huawei, who have come into not only to install the equipment, but to train us and to help apply the equipment in one industry after another. So that, and the advantage of that is you end up making the whole society more efficient with better communications, and each industry you make them more efficient, and so they're more competitive. So it's an irony is that by doing this, America's helping the BRICS carry out its plans. So, you know, it's a very good point Maria made there. Mickey, did you want to say something?
Yes, and just not to go off the points here, but I would appreciate some feedback, a discussion on Project 2025. I know, you know, Trump is basically he backed off from Project 2025 on some of the kind of domestic issues. To me, it's a very extreme form of neoliberalism. But there's a couple of things that he has sticking to. I mean, Project 2025 is really strong on abortion, but Trump has said he's not going to implement all the recommendations on abortion in that. He will stay with the issue of immigration. He has said he followed through on the deportation of illegals. And that's got all kinds of questions attached to it. And he is definitely I think, from what he's been saying, he'll follow the recommendations in Project 25 about filling the posts in his administration with loyalists. He'll get rid of whoever's in there now and start to replace people. But the personnel with people who are more in line with his thinking. And he will no doubt cut some of the social programs like the Department of Education in America. So it's not clear. I mean, that's a 900-page document, that Project 2025. And, you know, I think part of it was really supportive of an isolationist policy as well. That America should withdraw into its shell like a tortoise and try to keep out of what's going on in the world and not spend all its money on armaments, which is self-defeating in a way. So I was wondering if people had any thoughts about that Project 25 as it regards the international side of it.
Chris, you were talking just before we started, you were giving us some news about appointments that have been, you know, Trump's new appointments. I wonder if you might want to say something about that, you know, following on from what Mickey said about that.
Well, interestingly enough, it's the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who led the Senate campaign to get Hawaii banned. I think it was over, was it the Intel chip, wasn't it? But he was the instigator of that ban. And from what I've picked up, Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of State, and Michael Waltz, Defense. Michael Waltz wanted Chinese Olympics in 2020, the Americans to boycott it based on COVID disinformation from Wuhan and the treatment of the Uyghurs as well. But it seems that there is a very anti-Chinese hardliner appointment after appointment being made. And that would tie in with what I believe will be the main foreign policy aim of the Trump administration, which is to try and isolate China as much as possible.
You raised a question about whether Trump, whether Trump is going to be a true isolationist or not. Does anybody want to come in on that?
I sincerely believe that Donald Trump is one of the most unpredictable person you can ever find on the earth. He's very pragmatic. A lot of things that he said in the past, he's not gonna do it. The most crucial thing is about stopping the war. He wants to make his slogan is, I think from us as progressive, his slogan, making America great again, I think is one of the most powerful slogans I've ever heard coming from somebody like him. Making America great again. How is he going to do that? He has to stop those wars. He has to stop. He's already said that the billions of dollars that's going to the war to fund a useless war in Ukraine, he's got to stop it. He's not going to make America great again if he doesn't have the money to do so. He's not going to send money to Israel. I mean, we need to discuss a little bit about the economic crisis in the United States of America. America is heavily indebted. Trillions of dollars, over 40 trillions of dollars is owed in debt, and it's printing money like a wild animal. We need to discuss what is the situation, and maybe Mickey can help us a little bit. What is the economic situation in the United States of America? Trump won one of the main elements why he won the election was about the economic crisis and what he is promising to deliver to the ordinary people, ordinary working class people. Look at the statistics. I believe Chris is more familiar with the statistic. He should tell us what percentage of African Americans, Latin Americans, and other people voted for Trump. Ordinary people, and did vote for the Democrat, who claimed to be the champion of human rights, democracy, and freedom in the world. They police the world. They've created so much chaos all over the place that, I mean, it's unimaginable. So I think we need to move the discussion into what's happening in America itself. What is the social, economic, and cultural crisis there that they now face, and what effect it will have? Trump was not going to be carrying out those kinds of big talk that he makes. His son is mocking the current president of Ukraine, and that should tell you a lot. He will have an influence in the Trump government, I think.
Thanks, Mike. So, Mickey, you're based in the Midwest of America, in Minnesota. Perhaps you could give us a feeling of the situation of facing ordinary people, because the Democrats had said that one of the problems they had was that they said the economy is going great, that thing they called Bidenomics, but they kind of went silent during the election because the ordinary people don't seem to see it that way. What's your experience of economic life in America, and how do you see it developing?
Well, what the media says in support of Biden economics is everything is going great. But the reality on the ground from the average person, if you're not earning like close to $80,000, $100,000 a year, then things are tough. you know, I'm retired, but we can manage. But the average person, you know, you go out to the grocery store and that's where it hits you right between the eyes. The prices in the grocery stores have actually, they're double what they were about 12, 18 months ago. And people are just having more and more of a hard time paying their bills. Everybody's kind of complaining just to go in a grocery store. People will talk to you and say, hey, look at the price of this, it's ridiculous, you know. And what I noticed a lot just going around the grocery store is that a lot of the products are not selling like they were. So the store owners end up like they get close to the expiration dates. So they'll either give that food away to a food shelter, and or they will say you can get 2 of these for this price. So you try to offload the stuff that they're not selling. And the reason why they're not selling is people are doing without. So, and they're using the food banks instead. So, and I've noticed that even the quality of the food is deteriorating in the vegetable section. So it hits you on a daily basis. And then also, you know, if you want to buy some products that you need, you know, for repair in the house or a service, well, they've all gone up too. And they always use the excuse, well, it's a supply issue. And it's a hangover from COVID. Well, COVID was 4 years ago now. So, but they're still using that excuse. Even like collecting the garbage. Ours went up by $100. You know, so we just had to turn around and sort of look for a cheaper one. And people are doing that all the time. They're cutting back on vacations. They're cutting back on buying new cars. They're cutting back on buying houses because the prices of things that people, you know, for the essentials that people need have gone through the roof. And so I'm not sure when they talk about inflation is going down, I think to myself, well, there must be different forms of inflation that they're talking about. Because you know, the prices, there must be a price inflation for the things that people need has gone through the roof. So what's this other? I don't know how they can argue that Biden economics is really good. It might be good for big business. You know, they're the ones who are benefiting from the infrastructure plan. It's the big corporations, it's the big construction companies that will benefit from the building of roads and bridges, improvements on the railway system. But that's where the money's going with that Biden economics. So the average person is really struggling, and I think that had an impact on how people voted in the election. And I do want to get back to this Project 25 in China. Because it's mentioned about 500, China is mentioned, the threat of China and Chinese trade, competition is mentioned 500 times as a threat to American prosperity and well-being in the world. So, and the Chinese themselves are actually very weary of what was written about them in Project 25. So, and Trump is actually, you know, they always need a scapegoat. America has always needed some enemy, an enemy from within. And remember the enemy list that they talked about in the election? and an enemy without. How real that is with regards to China is a bit of a guesswork, but it's really saber rattling a lot. And I think we have to keep our ears and eyes open on what the implications of this saber rattling will mean for the buildup of the military. Sometimes that can become a reality and lead to an escalation and actually military conflict. But China is definitely more and more being seen and being portrayed as the enemy to American prosperity, and I think we have to watch that.
Yeah, just a bit of information about this project 2025. The Heritage Foundation, who wrote this document, and basically what they're trying to do with it is to create a detailed program for the Trump government. And they did the same thing for Reagan back in the 1980s. So when Reagan came to power in 81, January 81, they had a document, a long document, like a book, ready to inform and push the Reagan administration to do what they wanted. And people think that Reagan was a bit, they know he was a strong neoliberal, but they kind of got taken away by his Hollywood background and the fact he used to crack jokes and so on. And most people didn't know that he was a fanatical neoliberal. I mean, a total ideologue. In fact, journalists used to remark on the fact that when they used to sit down with Reagan, they were hoping for a kind of like a fireside chat, and that they could find out some interesting, details of his life and things like that, and some extra things that they didn't know about. And he would then subject them to an hour-long monologue on why they needed to support neoliberalism in great detail. And the guy had been fanatically pushing this since 1963. And so when he got into power in 1981, the first thing he did, he called the first meeting of his cabinet, he opened a cupboard and he took out the big, thick book of the Heritage Foundation document for his administration. And he got the copy, he had a whole number of copies, one for every cabinet member, handed them all out and said, this is what we're going to do in government. And they were all expected to go through the book and implement every detail of it. Now, in practice, and they did implement a lot of the book. There were some things they weren't able to because of the political realities, that they didn't have control of the Congress and they didn't have control of the Supreme Court and so on. Now, this situation around, the Project 2025 is the updated version. This is a much more radical document. For example, one of the things they want to do is they want to revolutionize the state by getting rid of a lot of civil servants and replacing them by political appointees, so that Trump can get all of his people into all kind of key positions, even lower levels of the bureaucracy, so that he can establish a neoliberal legacy for the future. And they've got all kinds of proposals that they want to push through. But the somewhat contradictory situation is that I think that Mike is right, that Trump is obviously not like Reagan. He's not a neoliberal fanatic. But the fact that he puts forward tariffs is not a neoliberal policy. And it was always, in fact, tariffs was always a position of Democrats. It was always one of their signature policies. And he's not an ideologue in that sense. He tends to be very pragmatic, as Mike said, and he'll adjust to different things. And he also takes into account, he prioritizes his personal interests much higher than typically you might think they would, and the president would do, and often in a very open way, and he tends to be very transactional. So but having said that, I suspect that the neoliberal movement, and if you look at these people like Elon Musk, David Sachs, a whole range of people around Trump, and Trump is coming into this. What's interesting is when Trump got elected the first time, he didn't expect to get elected. That was the first thing. So he wasn't really prepared. And when he got into power, he didn't have an ideological group around him. So what he did was he just appointed all these people he was recommended to appoint, and half of them turned out to be, fair weather friends who, as soon as things started to go wrong, came out attacking him, and ended up in the general election that we've just gone through, being on the other side and supporting the Democrats against him. But I think this is a very different situation because he's gathered around him. Or not just he personally has done it, but people have gravitated towards him who support his ideology of isolationism and neoliberalism and so on. And so they've got a very serious group of people who are behind Trump and who can fill in all these positions that he wants to fill. So therefore, I think that while he himself may be pragmatic, he's also very lazy, and he will allow all these people around him to get on with their jobs. I mean, he's also got a vice president in the shape of J.D. Vance, who's a very heavily ideological neoliberal, and who is going to probably run a lot of the government and let Trump will relax and leave it to his underlings. So I think a lot of Project 2025 is going to be carried out to the letter. You know, they've been thinking this out for a long time. They've been preparing for this moment. So I think we're going to expect a very heavy government. So one of the examples of that is that they want to abolish a lot of the federal institutions. And if they can't abolish them, some cases they're able to do it without, by executive order. But even where they can't do it, get it through the Congress, they will gut these agencies and so on. And what their idea is to further distribute all the powers of the central government down to the local states. And the reason they want to do that is that when they get it down at local states, most of the states are being controlled more and more by the neoliberals and by the Republicans. They can then introduce privatization, massive cuts, etc. And I think that's a big part of their strategy. I know Mickey has talked about that in the past, haven't you, Mickey?
Yeah, I do want to mention one other thing here to be aware of. I'm sorry to go on about Project 2025, but I do think it's really important. It will take quite a while to try to implement all of the policy recommendations in 2025, being 1,000 pages. It's this whole issue on the foreign policy, and Trump has often made statements about his foreign policy would be now based on peace through strength. Peace through strength is like, okay, we'll basically hold on to what we've got in the world, and we will back that up with our military, even when it's necessary. So you see the reaction, his reaction towards NATO is to actually call upon the NATO countries to contribute to the defense of Europe. He hasn't actually talked about disbanding NATO, even though its usefulness is out of date, in my opinion. But then, as I mentioned, the attention of, I think, Stephen Miller towards China is of concern. He has actually made comments about countering China's Belt and Road Initiative and what China is trying. He said they need to have policies that will deter these third world countries from getting involved with the Belt and Road Initiative from China. I don't know how that will play out. And the other foreign policy area and there's a conflict, contradictions and conflict potential, is the question of Taiwan. And Miller is actually, he's talked about the need to defend Taiwan through arming Taiwan, through putting weapons into Taiwan to deter China. And China's stated policy, as far as I know, with regards to Taiwan, is that they've never recognized it as an independent state. They've always said it's part of China and that one day it will be unified. Well, that is certainly not what Miller is saying, and the Trump administration is backing him up on that. So this peace through strength and the implications of what it means for U.S. and China relationships is worthy of, needs to be watched, and it's worthy of more discussion. It's very concerning, in my opinion.
Miller's just been appointed as Deputy Chief of Policy.
Right.
So, well, but as Pat mentioned earlier, that's more domestic, I think, Pat. But
Although maybe not. Yeah.
I thought Deputy Chief of Policy was international as well.
Yeah.
And I have to say that my views that I outlined at the beginning about the situation with China is based on Project 2025 and reinforced by the appointments he's making at the moment.
Okay.
So I would tend to agree with Mickey quite a lot here.
Do you want to? I wonder if let's focus more on the direct international effects of this election. What about Maria? What do you feel is like coming from Eastern Europe? I know you follow the Ukraine situation quite closely. What do you think the effect of this election is going to be on the Ukrainian war, and the different positions that are held by Zelensky and Putin and so on?
Well, it's very hard to tell because, Trump bragged at some point that he will end the war, but I don't think he's alone in this. And maybe because the way I'm looking at it is through a Marxian lens, and I'm thinking that there are people for whom the war is a very good business. They are making a lot of money. And maybe they are not willing to go along with the peaceful plan suggested by Donald Trump. Now, while it is true, and I think Donald Trump regards Ukraine as the dirty business of the Biden family, and he regards it as something unimportant that may be, a good for us. Maybe, we are lucky if this is the case. But as you said, Pat, he's not alone. Maybe there are people around him, people from the Republican Party who are also involved in this and making tons of money through the sales of weapons to Ukraine. And then it will be difficult to reach an agreement and to even start with the idea of negotiations. Because at the level of the European Union, the leadership is more and more Russophobic. Joseph Borrell is to be replaced by Kaja Kallas as the top diplomat of the EU. And Kaja Kallas is a person that at some point advocated for the breaking up of Russia. He is a fervent anti-Russian politician. And also Ursula von der Leyen is very, she's determined to continue this idea of pouring money and weapons into Ukraine. And the more, things are changing, and on the front lines, I'm watching closely what is happening, and Russia seems to be gaining pace, and taking village after village and town, and they are advancing, not with, lightning speed, but they are advancing. And the more they are advancing, the more the Europeans seem to be determined to continue with Project Ukraine. And we'll see. I'm not very, optimistic about it. I'm not very optimistic because, not because of Trump, he may be willing to end this war, but what about the persons around him that are probably gaining a lot of money from this Project Ukraine? So I'm not very optimistic. At the same time, I'm watching, because people are a little bit afraid, and especially the liberal elites, that positioned our country and positioned Romania in this very belligerent and very adversarial stance toward Russia. And now, if the United States are deciding that we have, as Colonel Douglas McGregor, which is one of the conservative, persons that was very vocal about ending Project Ukraine and also about ending NATO, he said that Europe has to stand on its own 2 feet and we have to find money to defend ourselves. Now, it would be very interesting after all this, crazy talk against Russia, all this belligerent claims and discourses and ideas, and Romanians saying that we are going to take Russia by ourselves because we can do it. We have a strong army, and all this crazy talk. Is going to be interesting to see where and if this umbrella called NATO decides to withdraw from Romania. It will be interesting, don't you think so? We will find ourselves in a very, very difficult situation that we put ourselves into, because, Romania, unfortunately, there is this situation where we tend to go over the top in terms of obedience. I mean, yes, we are part of this military alliance. Yes, NATO offers protection, at least in theory, but we tend to go over the top, and to expose ourselves to potential Russian, revenge and violence, because we tend to, you have these very small dogs, and they often bark very loudly, and this is how some of the Romanian politicians behave. Expecting, the bigger dog to come and defend us, of course. But you will see that it will be very interesting when, and if we find ourselves without NATO's support, because there was this talk of appointing Colonel Douglas McGregor, since he was a fervent supporter of Donald Trump, of appointing him in the administration, and he will probably try to implement some of these ideas that he's been advocating for some years now, ever since the war in Ukraine started. And it will be interesting for Romania, because the Americans have this tendency to at one point to just leave. And
So Maria, what about the situation actually in Ukraine? Is it a case that the will to fight in Ukraine is collapsing? It seems to be, we seem to be hearing about huge, massive desertions of something like 100,000 troops and growing unpopularity for Zelensky in Ukraine.
Yes, of course, I also read some reports claiming that the closer you get to the front line, the more people are willing to negotiate, the more people want this to end. Because the further away you are, the easiest it is to become a keyboard warrior. But when you're faced with the actual consequences of the war, it seems like, there's some sense coming to your hand, and you want to find peaceful solutions. And unfortunately, I don't have information. I read reports about it, and it seems quite plausible. The situation on the front line is quite dramatic for Ukraine, since, yes, as it said, there are reports about soldiers leaving the front line, reports about young people just gathered, very quickly, and then they are sent directly to the front line with no training. And these people either die or they flee, and this is more and more difficult to defend the cities, the villages. And as I told you recently, you don't hear it in the mainstream press, and especially in the Western media. But if you follow people who explain in detail what is happening in Ukraine, you'll see that there are a lot of villages, cities, and there's a lot of ground, that is covered day by day and taken and conquered by the Russians. it seems like the situation is quite tragic for Ukraine. And the more tragic it becomes, the more determined European leaders such as Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, this replacement for Joseph Borrell, seem to be on sending weapons and money to Ukraine.
Thanks.
I've got another question here on Ukraine, and that's to do with how it was portrayed as a struggle between authoritarianism and democracy. You know, if you go back to the beginnings of all this conflict as it arose between those in the west of Ukraine who were saying that they did not want to be tied into Russia, and those in the eastern regions who were speaking Russian thought it would be okay. And then there was a coup, and the coup was based, and that's where that whole argument came up. It's like they wanted to sort of have Western democracy, not Russian authoritarianism. And yet it seems to me to have morphed more into a struggle between two possible authoritarian forms of government. Yeah, on the one hand, you have Russian authoritarianism as exemplified through Putin. And then those people behind Zelensky who are nationalistic in their orientation and couldn't care less about basically democracy. So, and neither could Trump. Trump seems to favor authoritarianism that suits his particular way of looking at the world. So what to me is a big issue going on now within Ukraine itself to reach a resolution. Nobody's talking about rebuilding the trade union movement and the left within Ukraine. They say, I mean, they've been decimated. And really, you know, the struggle for peace is not really requires a struggle for the rebuilding of democracy or the recreation of democracy in Ukraine. Now, Trump doesn't want that, and I don't think Putin wants it. But it's not being talked about. It's just being talked about as like, this is a clash of ideologies here that's going on currently. And it's based on what is the better form of authoritarianism? I think Ukraine's going to need billions of dollars to reconstruct itself. But I don't hear much on the left about supporting the rebuilding of democracy within Ukraine. And I don't think that's even part and parcel of what Trump is talking about either. I tend to think that he is more supportive of a Hungarian-style authoritarian government in Ukraine that wouldn't be too friendly to Russia and Putin.
What do the comrades think about this this question of authoritarianism versus democracy? Because you know, under Biden, you remember he had these international summits for democracy. I think he held two of them, and he tried to frame, as all the Western governments did as well, this struggle between China and Russia with the West as being a struggle between.
I want to come back on this issue on Trump. You see, we're not talking about someone who has any firm ideological, political philosophy. Trump is a maverick. Let's analyze him. He is the first type of person who finds himself as president of the United States of America. He, as you said earlier, Pat, Trump is a person who is interested in him, Trump, and what he can gain from what he's doing. So when he does something, he has, like our vice president here, anything he does, he has to have a personal interest in it. He has to gain something personally. That is Donald Trump. And he doesn't mind. He told Michael Pompeo, thank you very much for supporting me and that's it. He didn't appoint him again as foreign minister. That tells a lot about what Trump is. So he's everybody who was right and left or center have characterized him as somebody who's highly unpredictable. So that's what we're dealing with. It's very difficult for us, very complex and complicated for us to pin down what he's going to do today, what he's going to do tomorrow, what he's going to do next month, and what he's going to do next year. He's not going to take into consideration what people around him are telling him. He can easily dismiss them, quite easily, to get his way. That's what he is. When they call him a dictator, he is a dictator. He behaves in his personal life and otherwise as a dictator. He's one of the most dangerous presidents we have had in the United States of America. So let's analyze him. Let's analyze the situation based on who we are dealing with. The man is a lunatic.
Coming on to the question of Israel, which is obviously, you know, a very urgent situation. What do comrades feel? I had heard that Trump had told the Israelis, but you know, you get these kind of behind the scenes stories. You don't know what to completely believe. But I had heard that he's told the Israelis that he's fully backing them on whatever they want to do. Obviously, much more solidly than Biden. He's willing to go behind Israel and he won't criticize them, won't try to restrain them. But that he's told them that he wants it all over by the time he's inaugurated, which kind of ties in with what Mike has just said, that he sees the foreign policy issues as what suits him and makes life easy for him, rather than any principled approach to these things. And for the Israelis, perhaps they welcome this in a way because they know they can't carry on this war forever because it's damaging the Israeli economy, it's fracturing the Israeli society, and there has to come a point at which they know that, I'm sure they know they can't take over Lebanon, hold Lebanon forever and things like that. So maybe this will actually be welcomed by them behind the scenes as a kind of deadline, January the 20th, when Trump takes the presidency. And actually, in fact, I have heard that they are making plans to get everything done by then. So I think we could probably expect, if that is true, we don't know 100%, but if that is true, that will probably mean the acceleration of the war in the Middle East against Gaza, against Lebanon, but then with a relatively finite end in a couple of months' time. What do other comrades feel about the Israeli conflict?
You're dealing with a guerrilla war atmosphere in the Middle East. It is not something that you can bring. We will see a toppling of the Middle Eastern dictatorships one after the other. That is my prediction of it, because they cannot sustain what is happening in the Middle East. As I said earlier in the discussion, we have more than 200,000 people who have been killed, buried there. The Muslims are a group of people, which is 1 billion people, who are not going to forgive what has happened there. They're the younger Muslims in the Middle East and on other parts of the world are going to continuously fight against and destroy the whole of Israel, even if it takes for the rest of the century. They are not going to forgive them. It means that you're going to have terrorism as they have never seen before. And we've had an experience of this. So let's discuss that. That's important. Trump does not have monopoly over what is going on in the world. The world has changed. It is not China standing by itself or Russia. We are promoters of BRICS, which means that we have a new world, a global world situation. They're not going to be able to defeat China in any shape or form, neither Russia or the members of BRICS. never mind what they may do. We have to base our analysis on what is happening in the United States of America. There's a major economic crisis. How are they going to solve that? There are going to be marches and demonstrations against the Trump administration not very long when he takes power. Let's discuss that. What are the consequences? What are going to be the consequences if he does not fulfill some of these promises that he made about make America great again? What does that mean? That's a big slogan. What does it mean in practice?
Okay. Any other comrade like to come in?
Just to back to the Gaza situation, Netanyahu's envoy Ron Dermer has just spent the weekend with at Mar-a-Lagos with first the Donald and then one of the boys, and also the annexation of the West Bank under Israeli control has been raised again today in the Israeli Parliament by the foreign minister. So I don't see the Trump administration being anything but a malignant factor for the Palestinian people. I think we obviously know about the history of East Jerusalem and the American embassy. We are looking, I think, at annexation under Israeli control of the settlements, the illegal settlements in the West Bank, and possibly the occupation of Gaza. I think it's quite grim. If I were to say that for me, the one overriding this catastrophe of the Trump election is Palestine.
Yeah. What do you think about Lebanon? Do you think that Israel will try to permanently settle some of Lebanon?
I think it's a possibility that they may try to make some settlements along the border, or completely destroy the Lebanese side for miles and miles, so that it becomes like a sort of military
demilitarized zone.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
Yeah, right, yeah. Sorry, Maria, you were going to say something there. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I think the tragedy in Gaza and the massacre and the fact that it's, live stream massacre and you see all these tragedies all day long. I'm afraid to open up my Instagram account because the images are so terrible and they kept pouring in, and it's impossible to watch what's going on there. And I think one of the main deterrent in terms of people not voting for Harris was Gaza. I mean, as much as women were, afraid that Donald Trump might restrict reproductive rights and he might further push this agenda of banning abortions and deny women their reproductive rights and reproductive health. I think that they were more disgusted with Harris not taking a stance against what is happening in Gaza. And I think this was also one of the main things that got Democrats to lose these elections. And it was so predictable. And also there were major mainstream media channels that were showing that Harris was saying one thing to Muslim constituency, probably I think it was in Michigan, where she said that she will not be silent about Gaza. And then when she spoke to citizens that were more pro-Israel, said that she will defend Israel's right to defend itself and to have the means to defend itself. And I think that was a big nail into her coffin, because as much as you advocate for abortions, you advocate for trans rights, for gay rights, that's perfect. But at the same time, what do you do? What do you do when it comes to these people? But I think the correct lens to look at this is what Nancy Fraser said when she described what she calls the cannibal capitalism. She discusses the situation of people who are racialized through discourses and are somehow considered lower, of a lower status. So any kind of violence toward them is justified. And what I want to say, because I think we're approaching the end of our discussion, one of the saddest things with regards to this contradiction in Harris's discourses, but not only in Harris's discourses, I think in most of the Democratic Party's discourses, is between progressive values, but in the private life, you know, abortion, LGBT rights, and extremely cruel international politics agendas, you know, leading to massacres such as the one in Gaza. And I think progressives have to lose from this. And also me as a feminist, I feel so betrayed in the sense that she somehow, and the Democrats somehow managed to connect progressive causes such as fighting for reproductive rights to a completely despicable, you know, attitude in terms of international politics towards people that are conservatives. And I think it has to do with the fact that these people, you know, especially in the Middle East, they are conservatives. Of course, they do not share our values. Of course, they do not share our values. But at the same time, what do? You somehow write feminism on a bomb and you bomb feminism into a country. What do? I mean, it's unbelievable. What have you done in Afghanistan? What have you done in Iraq? You just write LGBT, you write feminism on the bomb you're dropping on those people and expect that they will get it and they will suddenly end up treating their women better if you do that. It's for the worst. I think it's for the worst. They are going to hate you. Mike is completely right. They are going to try to kill you and to destroy you, and they will hate you for the end of their lives if you do that. So how is this going to promote, you know, the progressive agenda? And I'm terrified because the Trump is the complete opposite, you know. I mean, he sets up in motion this anti-progressive agenda by exposing the hypocrisy. And, you know, at some point he's right. I mean, you cannot be so hypocritical and expect people to believe you. And look, there are, you know, these leaders like such as Donald Trump and others that take advantage of this hypocrisy and they bury the Democrats along with the progressive causes. And who's going to suffer? Exactly the minorities, women, sexual minorities, ethnic minorities, migrants, and all the vulnerable groups in the society.
I mean, one of the funny things about what following on from what Maria said is that, that not only is there contradictions between what the Democrats are fighting for and what they do in practice, these terrible things they're doing in the Middle East, but also it's the same on the Trump side. The Trump side, they keep going on about how they want to protect the life of the unborn child, right? You know, by banning abortion or restricting abortion. But then they're going along fully supporting the killing of children in Gaza on a mass scale. It does not make any sense. The same with the Democrats who are going along with the killing of women on a mass scale in Gaza, despite they say that they support women. So it's a complete, as you say, hypocrisy on both sides to an incredible degree. One more thing I wanted to raise was the question of the BRICS countries. And what and countries who are maybe looking to join the BRICS countries. I wonder if I could ask Altaf from Pakistan if he could say something about the reaction in Pakistan to this election of Trump, and how that relates to, you know, because Trump has said that he wants to prevent anybody joining the BRICS or anybody de-dollarizing, and that he'll put 100% tariffs on that country to prevent them doing it. Now, in the case of it, there are a lot of countries now that are not doing that much business with America, so that's a bit of an empty threat. But I think with the countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh and so on, who are doing a lot of trade with America, this could be quite a serious threat. I wonder if Altaf could say something about that. Altaf, would you like to say something?
Thank you, but I think so. Let me start from the outcome of US election has significant implications for Pakistan, both economically and politically. Economically, the US policies and the administration and trade policies can impact Pakistan textile sector, which competes with the countries that benefiting from US trade agreements, just like India and other. Additionally, the election result can influence foreign aid and investment in Pakistan that can impact Pakistan's economy, and that mostly based on foreign remittances and the help and debt from other institutes. Politically, the nature of US and Pakistan relation can shift based on the administration in power, affecting diplomatic and military cooperation. US policies toward South Asia, including relation with India and the perspective of Afghanistan, can influence Pakistan's security and political landscape. On the issue of China and Pakistan relations, surely if the US and the Pakistan allies continue their long-standing agreements, then that can affect the relation between China and Pakistan. So it's matter a lot for Pakistan because US have long-standing interest in Pakistan and in this region. On the issue of Palestine or Gaza, basically, overall society is of a thought that Gaza is under a siege, and this is a genocide, and people have some reaction. But on the top level, in military and in political circles, they are mostly they are silent on this issue, just issuing some statement or showing some sympathy, just like if you imagine the role of Qatar and other countries that surrounding Gaza and Palestine, overall Israel, they have a little bit actions and interest in Gaza against Israel. So I think in Pakistan, people have some sentiments to show resistance, but there is nothing. Just only a rally, only some rallies of solidarity and something else. So, in the perspective of Islamic State, I don't think so. They want to make it a religious issue because they all have some limitations and some interest economically and politically interest that belongs to you can say that the policeman of capitalist democracy or the capitalist world order from US and other countries that think and add and something. So in internal conflict in Pakistan, just like resurgence of terrorism, especially against the Chinese in Balochistan. In this resurgence, surely the army would look for, you can say that, look for money to fight against terrorism. I think I am complete. Thank you.
Okay,
You can
thanks very
elaborate.
much. Yeah, thanks, Altaf. Okay, so what on a more broader question is do we think that the election of Trump is actually helpful to the development of the BRICS? You know, in the sense that he's no longer going to be pushing this ideological question of turning this into a democracy versus autocracy struggle internationally. and that he will actually, if he takes measures against countries that trying to get out from under the dollar or who are trying to join BRICS, that could actually boomerang, that could further push countries away and force them into the arms of the BRICS to, link their economies to all the BRICS countries rather than have them linked to the American economy. What do comrades think? Do they think this election result will help the BRICS or make it more or hinder it? What do comrades feel?
I'm going to jump in, Pat. I think it would help
Yeah.
them. But it's apart from Trump, the other elephant in the room is the American debt. And I think we talked about it. It's like 30 trillion currently, and
36 trillion.
$36 trillion.
Right.
Comrades, I'm afraid I have to leave.
Okay. Well, Chris, we're just coming to the end now. We're about to.
I'm afraid I have to leave
Okay.
right now. I'm really
All
sorry.
right. No problem then. All right.
And-
Great to see you, man.
Okay, I'll just
Okay.
kind of try to summarize it as best I can. I think there's implications. There's no good solution within the framework of a capitalist system on how to resolve this issue with the debt. The three options that he's got is to borrow money. And the only place you can borrow money from is from big businesses who will charge more interest on whatever loans that they have, which will just increase the debt. You could have like a wealth tax, which I doubt whether that would actually happen in America. And all of these have implications. If he tries to cut social programs in order to reduce the debt, it will immediately put pressure on those who've been elected. The local level, at the local level, people will reject those cuts, and the protest movements will continue to grow against any attempt to cut. And businesses are not going to accept being taxed. So it's sort of the debt is only going to increase, and as the debt increases, it's going to have an impact on international relationships. Who's going to want to invest in America when it can't even pay down its own debt? The dollar starts to lose value in that case. And unfortunately, America does not have a strong enough socialist left movement to be able to put forward the real alternative to addressing this issue of accumulated debt within the American capitalist system, which would require having the courage to tax businesses and to invest in growth. So it is a big elephant in the room. And it's complicated because Trump doesn't know, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to deal with this. And I'm just concerned that what he's going to do is start cutting social programs in order to safeguard the debt, which is going to have it's just a no-win situation within the system itself, all around.
I mean, just on that point, Mickey, on the American economy, we don't know exactly yet, but all the signs seem to be pointing to a major economic recession next year. So that will make it very difficult to Trump. So Trump's period in office could be actually full of all kind of problems that prevent him, solving the contradictions of American society, but even could make it difficult for him to implement a coherent foreign policy, in addition to all the other things we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anybody else want to talk? Anybody else want to comment on whether they feel the Trump election will help the BRICS or hinder the BRICS? Anybody want to say anything about that before we round up? Anybody?
Well, I think it will help the BRICS because he's not a very competent person. He's not a very competent person. He has no deep knowledge of economy. He has no vision except for, very simple and very simplistic perspectives. And unfortunately for the US, it's not that he will help the BRICS directly because he wants to, but because he's incompetent enough to lead the United States in the bad direction.
So yeah, that's competence, I suppose, is something we haven't talked about. That's quite a
Uh,
good point.
I
Mike,
have to
yeah.
agree with you. I have to agree with Maria. I think that's where we'll end it. We have never experienced anything like this before, because I don't, as Maria quite rightly said, the man is just stupid and ignorant, and he does not understand politics, neither economics. So he does not even understand that the world has changed, and he does not understand, because of his poor knowledge of economics, he does not have no understanding of how China is a country that operates and is run by the Communist Party, which is not going to tolerate this type of nonsense that is going on. We are in a new era, and I think the world is experiencing something that human beings have never experienced in the whole of human history. So I think as far as I am concerned, we should be very optimistic, and we should continue what we're doing, because I believe that the overwhelming majority of people in the world are now going to be entering into a new era that they have never seen in human history. So I think that what Trump is doing is adding to us, progressives. That's what he's doing. And he has no understanding of this.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think we probably all would agree that the Trump phenomenon is an indicator of the decline of the American and Western civilization, actually. And funnily enough, it will have an immediate effect of causing a lot of division and confusion among America's allies, because they're going to have problems to know what America's going to do. They're going to have problems with being able to say that America is this leading light, the shining city on the hill that they talk about. So I think that I think we can take an optimistic conclusion from, funnily enough, from Trump's election, even if it actually for American people itself, I think the Trump election could be pretty devastating in the coming years. It could lead to massive privatization cuts and so on, and economic dislocation, and his promises. He won't be able to carry out his promises, in my opinion. There's fundamental flaws in all of his proposals, and contradictions in his position. So I think he will suffer from a lot of problems in his administration, a lot of infighting. So for Americans themselves, I think this is a pretty bad result, and not that the alternative, the Democratic alternative, would have been great either. But I think for the world, it actually probably will accelerate the decline of American power. So I think comrades will probably all agree with that. All right. So on that basis, can I thank everybody for participating in the discussion? And I think it's been very interesting. It raised a lot of issues, and actually probably raised a lot of issues that we need to go into in more detail at some point in the future. All right, comrades. Thank you very much. Bye-bye to you all.